I've been on this bench for 38 years and I thought I'd seen everything. Young men making terrible choices, families torn apart by bad decisions, and the endless cycle of entitlement that seems to plague certain corners of our society. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what walked into my courtroom on that cold November morning in Providence. The case file read simply, Derek Michael Cole, 32, charged with assault and battery on an elderly person. The victim was Robert Martinez, a 70-year-old Vietnam veteran. But behind those clinical words lay a story that would test every principle I've ever held dear about justice, family, and the price of privilege. Derek Cole walked into my courtroom like he owned the place, designer suit, expensive watch catching the light, and that smirk. God, that arrogant smirk that made everyone in the gallery immediately dislike him. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. Behind him trailed his attorney, Marcus Richardson, one of Providence's most expensive defense lawyers, the kind who specializes in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. But here's what caught my attention immediately. When Derek passed the row where Robert Martinez sat, wearing his Vietnam veteran cap and supporting his broken wrist in a cast, Derek didn't even glance at him. No acknowledgement, no remorse, nothing. This young man looked right through a decorated war hero like he was invisible furniture. I had already read the case file. 3 days earlier, Robert Martinez was walking his dog in Roger Williams Park when Derek, driving his BMW at excessive speed, nearly struck him. When Martinez raised his hand to signal Derek to slow down, Derek stopped his car, got out, and violently shoved the 70-year-old veteran to the ground. According to 3 witnesses, Derek then stood over Martinez and said something that still makes my blood boil. "Do you know who I am? My father is the police chief. Call the cops. I dare you." Then he drove away, leaving the Vietnam veteran bleeding on the pavement with a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured wrist. Security camera footage captured everything, and when it went viral on local news, the entire city of Providence demanded justice. When I asked Derek how he pleaded, his attorney jumped up to speak for him. But I wanted to hear Derek's voice. I wanted to look him in the eye and see what kind of man assaults an elderly veteran for asking him to slow down in a public park. Derek stood up, adjusted his suit jacket with theatrical precision, looked directly at me with that insufferable smirk still plastered on his face, and said the word that would define the next hour of his life: ridiculous. He called this whole proceeding ridiculous. I've learned to read people in my decades on this bench. Derek's body language, his tone, his complete dismissal of the gravity of his situation told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't remorse. This wasn't even concern. This was annoyance that he had to be here at all. I slowly removed my glasses, my signature move when I'm about to deliver a reality check that someone desperately needs. I repeated his word back to him, ridiculous. Then I told him I had reviewed the security footage, read the hospital reports, and seen the photographs of Mr. Martinez's injuries. Did he want to reconsider his characterization? Derek glanced at his lawyer, who was frantically trying to signal him to stay quiet, but Derek's ego wouldn't let him back down. He said, and I quote, "This is being blown out of proportion. Some old guy got in my way, I barely touched him, and now I'm being dragged into court like a criminal." The gallery gasped. Some old guy. He had just called a decorated Vietnam veteran, a man who risked his life for this country. Some old guy. The disrespect was so palpable, so breathtaking, that even my court reporter's fingers paused above her keyboard. I stood up from my bench and walked around to the front. This is something I do rarely, when the situation demands it, when someone needs to understand that they're facing a moment that will define them. I looked at Derek and asked if he knew who Mr. Martinez was. Derek shrugged with theatrical indifference. Some guy who was in my way. At that moment, Robert Martinez slowly stood, supporting himself with his good arm. With quiet dignity that comes from a lifetime of service and sacrifice, he introduced himself. United States Marine Corps, 1968 to 1971. 2 tours in Vietnam. Purple Heart and Bronze Star for valor. Retired Providence firefighter. 50 years of service to his community. When he finished speaking and sat back down, I turned to Derek and asked if he understood what he had just heard. He had assaulted a decorated combat veteran, a man who risked his life for this country, a man who spent 30 years running into burning buildings to save people, and Derek had called him some old guy who got in his way. Derek's response revealed everything about his character. He said he didn't know Martinez was a veteran, as if that somehow mattered, as if assault is only wrong when the victim has earned the right not to be attacked. That's when I knew Derek needed more than legal consequences. He needed a lesson in humanity. But then something happened that nobody in that courtroom expected. I looked toward the back of the courtroom and called out, "Chief Cole, would you please come forward?" The entire gallery turned around. Sitting in the back row, rising slowly with the weight of 35 years in law enforcement, was Police Chief Thomas Cole, Derek's father. He had been there the whole time, watching his son destroy everything he had spent his life building. Derek spun around, and for the first time since entering my courtroom, his arrogance completely shattered. The color drained from his face as he watched his father walk down the center aisle, each step heavy with disappointment and heartbreak. Chief Cole stood at attention before my bench, his police training evident in his posture despite wearing civilian clothes. I thanked him for being present and acknowledged how difficult this must be. Then I addressed the elephant in the room. Derek seemed to believe that his father's position would protect him from accountability. I wanted to give Chief Cole the opportunity to address that belief. What happened next restored my faith in human decency and parental integrity. Chief Cole took a deep breath, and when he spoke, his voice was steady but filled with emotion. He told his son and everyone in that courtroom that he was wrong. He had spent 35 years serving the city, arresting criminals, putting his life on the line to protect the innocent. Never once had he believed that his badge gave him or his family the right to break the law. Then Chief Cole said something that will stay with me forever. He told me he had watched the security footage the day after the incident. He knew exactly what his son had done to Mr. Martinez. He was there not as Police Chief Cole, but as Thomas Cole, a father who had failed to teach his son the most basic lessons of respect, humility, and accountability. His voice cracked slightly as he continued. He thought he had taught Derek right from wrong, shown him what it means to serve others, to protect the vulnerable, to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their station in life. But somewhere along the way, he had failed. Derek was crying now, the first real emotion I had seen from him. But Chief Cole wasn't finished. He looked at his son and said he loved him. That would never change. But love doesn't mean protecting someone from the consequences of their actions. Love means holding them accountable so they can become the person they're supposed to be. Then Chief Cole turned back to me and said something that made legal history in Providence. Whatever sentence I deemed appropriate, he would support fully. His son had assaulted a decorated veteran, shown no remorse, and disrespected everything he had spent his life standing for. Derek deserved to face the full weight of the law. In fact, Chief Cole asked me to be even more severe than normal because his son needed to learn this lesson before he hurt someone else. I've seen many moments of courage in my courtroom, but watching a father choose justice over protecting his child's mistakes was something extraordinary. Chief Cole could have used his influence to make this go away. Instead, he chose to uphold the very values that Derek had trampled on. The sentence I delivered was comprehensive. Derek would serve 90 days in county jail, complete 200 hours of community service specifically working with elderly veterans at the VA hospital, attend anger management counseling for 1 year, and write formal apology letters to both Mr. Martinez and the responding officers. But I wasn't finished. Derek would also create a video apology to be posted on the Providence Police Department's social media accounts, explaining what he did, why it was wrong, and what he was doing to make amends. After completing his sentence, he would speak to police academy recruits about privilege, accountability, and what happens when you believe you're above the law. Chief Cole added one final consequence. Derek would be moving out of his house. At 32 years old, he had been living under his father's roof and protection. That ended that day. As Derek was processed for custody, Chief Cole approached his son. They stood face to face for a long moment. Then the chief did something that broke everyone's heart. He hugged Derek tightly and whispered that he loved him, but he loved him enough to let him face this. Derek would get through it, and when he did, he would be the man Chief Cole knew he could be. 6 months later, Derek Cole walked out of jail a different man. His 200 hours at the VA hospital had turned into ongoing volunteer work. He apologized to Robert Martinez in a meeting both men described as healing. Martinez became Derek's mentor, teaching him about service, sacrifice, and the true meaning of strength. Derek's video apology was viewed over 3 million times. Young people across the country saw what accountability looks like when privilege meets justice. Chief Cole's approval ratings increased because voters respected his integrity, his willingness to choose principles over personal comfort. And Robert Martinez, he stood in my courtroom that day and showed us all what grace looks like. When I asked if he had anything to say, he said he didn't want revenge. He just wanted Derek to understand that every person deserves respect, regardless of age, rank, or position. If Derek learned that lesson, the whole experience would have been worth it. That's the power of justice done right. It doesn't just punish wrongdoing, it transforms hearts. It doesn't just enforce laws, it teaches humanity. And sometimes, when we're very fortunate, it reminds us that real love isn't protecting people from consequences they need to face. It's supporting them through those consequences so they can become better. That's what I learned from Derek Cole, Chief Thomas Cole, and Robert Martinez. That's the lesson that will change you forever.